Okay, how's it going, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, so in this episode, I thought I'd try to briefly say something about the importance of words and symbols. Okay, so in Plato's Phaedo, Socrates, before he's about to die, warns his friends, of all things, not to become haters of words. He tells them that this would amount to the greatest possible evil. In other words, for him, there's a profound danger in misology. That is to say, in the hatred and the corruption of logos, of words. Okay, but why does this corruption of the word matter so much? Well, basically, language is the medium through which we move. It's the space or the room in which we live. And when we sacrifice a part of our language, that space that we live in becomes just a little bit smaller. Every time we lose a word, a light has been extinguished, and so made every day forward a slightly darker one. And I think actually Socrates' concern here might be even more relevant today. I mean, not only do we appear to be reading a little bit less, but it seems that our language is becoming more, how do I put it? Well, more abbreviated and technical. In this way, I think you could argue that it's becoming a little bit more impoverished. Now, I don't know, maybe you could respond to this by saying that because of the scientific and technological age that we live in, our language has actually become more and more precise and accurate. Well, okay, but here's the thing. As the psychologist Rollo May pointed out, to speak more accurately or specifically is not necessarily to speak more truthfully or meaningfully. I mean, we might have an excellent vocabulary for all sorts of technical subjects, sure. But has this sort of language eclipsed more meaningful forms of communication? That's the question. So here's an example that Rollo May gives. He gives the example of two different descriptions of the moon landing. He says that we can describe it on the one hand as an extravehicular landing, or on the other as humans walking on the moon. Now, to say that it's an extravehicular landing is kind of technical sounding, right? And there's something also something very abstract and distant about it. But on the other hand, to say that we're walking on the moon, well, that connotes an infant's very first brave steps, right? And that they're taken on the moon, well, there's something very, adventurous and romantic about this, right? In other words, this second description connects us with ourselves in a way that the first one doesn't really do. It connects us back to our oldest natures, but also points us towards our futures. Well, this brings me to the importance of symbols. You know, it's interesting. The etymology of the word is Greek, and what it meant is something like a bringing together or a connecting up of things. Well, that's what symbols do. They can connect us with nature and with ourselves and with others in a way that other words just can't do. But again, in our age, marked by technology and efficiency, I think we've lost some of our symbolic and poetical language. Our language has become symbolically poor. And so what we seem to be largely operating with are words that do little more than, denote the objects to which they are attached. Kind of like Adam, when he names all the animals. In other words, they exhaust themselves in their use. There's a terminus to them. But symbols, on the other hand, are not like this. A symbol always suggests more than what it states. As Carl Jung said, a symbol has a kind of numinous quality which points towards other realities. In this way, then, symbolical and poetical language can open us out into a world we hadn't ever imagined, into all sorts of moonlight enchanted nights. Now, I think the benefit that this would have for our interpretive powers and our psychological growth is pretty significant. I mean, when our language is alive and full, we become alive too, no? So maybe now we can see why the bankruptcy of symbols and a decline in poetic spirit is potentially dangerous. It's because the limit of our language is the limit of our horizons, of ourselves, and of the world. Socrates seems right. We abandon the richness of language at our own peril. Again, that's because it's the medium through which we know and live, and through which we flourish or don't. I mean, do we really want to live in the purely utilitarian or in the icy waters of calculation, to paraphrase Marx? And let's also not forget that since language defines reality, the more our deep symbolic language gets replaced by a largely practical and technological one, the more we will begin to see ourselves as that language expresses, namely as mere technological one-dimensional beings. Well, so without trust in words, and without love of words, without genuine philology, this is probably what's going to happen. You know, Rousseau has this pretty interesting view on the origin of language. It's certainly wrong. I'm not denying that. But it's beautiful. And I think that in some sense it captures a bit of what I'm trying to say here. You see, he believed that language was the product of the southern warm countries, and that initially it was basically musical and emotional in nature. What happened though is that when it made its way north to the colder climates, the language became increasingly less passionate and more efficient and more rational. I don't know, it's nice to think that language began in the poetic side of life, right? That it wasn't founded on the prosaic, but rather on feelings and play and dance and on the song of birds. I mean, what better way than these things to bring us out of ourselves and into the world and closer to those undiscovered horizons. Bye for now.